We're continuing with Counterpower, Propagating Climate Justice from the Netherlands, and I'll be chairing this part of the program together with my most dear comrades, an artist, a cultural worker, I would say someone who laid the foundations for social practice, critical social practice in the Netherlands, although working internationally across a grand variety of solidarities and party memberships. And also the newly appointed artistic director of BAK, Basis voor Actuele Kunst. This is Jeanne van Heeswijk. I'm very agitated for you, so it brings out my mobilizing part. We're going to chair this conversation with a group of organizations that operates under the umbrella or that are part of a coalition that is known as True Counterpower, founded by an organizer, Serda Demir, and an artist, lliada, Charalambous. And we're going to first ask you to join us here. Yes, there you are. And out of the organization that you have built, you invited a group of your fellow members, activists and organizers, and we are bringing to the floor racial justice activist Shirish Abraham of Qollective, we are bringing Sada, one of the founding members of the Sudanese Refugee Collective. We are bringing Mustafa Essaouyen from one of the initiators of Woonopstand, Housing Rebellion. And Victor from XR Rebellion Justice Now. And the first questions will go to the initiators of the Counterpower Coalition and will be asked by my dear comrade here. And I'm hoping for a renewed, battery-upgraded microphone.
Hello, everybody. I have the honor to start to ask the first questions. And I think, what is true counterpower? It sounds like a very simple first question, but I think it's important to ask that. How do you gather, learn and organize collectively? What is true counterpower?
Thank you, Jeanne, for the question. Is this working? Yeah? Okay, super. Firstly, thank you to Jonas and to BAK for the invitation, and thank you to all our organizations that join us. So True Counterpower is an attempt to build a grassroots activist organization alliance and a united front that can strive for a more egalitarian environment. True Counterpower started about 2 years ago when we started convening at the People's Parliament in the Van Abbe Museum. And it constituted out of a series of assemblies in which different activist organizations were invited to give trainings on their tools of resistance and to exchange amongst each other this practical knowledge of how do we resist in the streets, how do we build true counterpower and not wait for parliamentary politics to save us or to strive for our liberation, but how do we build this united front on our own. Maybe good to say also that out of True Counterpower, Reading Counterpower emerged, which is a bi-weekly reading group that takes place in Rotterdam in Gemal op Zout at the Afrikanderwijk Cooperative, and in which we collectively engage with the text of revolutionary movements in order to build up our theoretical education, let's say, of how do we learn how to resist, what are the tools that we can learn from contemporary, but also from revolutionary movements of the past. So it also makes sense that we meet here with all the ancestors, human and not human. Yeah, thank you.
I think that was a good summary.
You're already handing it over to me, dear comrade.
This one says we do Team
Oh, did we go back and forward?
Yeah.
Okay. So in that case, I want to ask something about...
He wrote the script, by the way.
About the critic... but it's clearly off script entirely. Writing it but not following it, typical. Can you say something about the moment the moment that brought this necessity? I feel counterpower emerged at the same time that the neo-fascist coalition in the Netherlands was consolidating. Is that the case? How would you say that this?
Yeah, well, actually, I think it was even before. But yeah, I mean, we were all anticipating that fascism would grow and they would get power. And we felt that there were a lot of attempts to build solidarity networks. And then we were like, okay, there are attempts to have solidarity networks, but we need more than just solidarity networks. We really need to unify or have a unified front and coordinate better together and also radicalize even more. So yeah, it is much linked to the anticipation, but also feeling, sometimes, which is very like human, desperate, powerless, or getting burnt out. And that's why we were like, okay, we are fighting against capitalism. That's like the basic, of course, that's a principle. We are anti-system, and there are several groups, but they should work together much more often, and that's why we thought about having True Counterpower as a beginning.
So you felt there was a lack of coordination amongst progressive organizations in the Netherlands?
Exactly, yes. There was, I think we felt a bit also that it felt like we had to begin from scratch because, we are not coordinated. We don't know anything about our agendas. And we feel like we're fighting the same, but with different topics. We felt that the coordination was not strong enough. At least it was not strong enough that bothers the government. And we want to bother them, and we really kind of strengthen and solidify our cooperation.
It's a good criteria. If they're not afraid, then we're not doing something right.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I also wonder, because of course I've been to some readings and some of the sessions, and so I wonder also because we talk a lot here about climate justice. What is the role of climate justice in True Counterpower?
Well, for us, I mean, as we are attempting to build a progressive, united front, we believe that a lot of struggles are interconnected. For us, the question, how do you build a feminist, anti-imperialist, anti-capitalist, anti-fascist, anti-racist, so on, front, then climate justice, I think, is inherent to all the struggles that we have in our network. It's not a separable thing, but yeah, and I think our focus in our assemblies as well as in our reading groups is that all these struggles are actually one and the same struggle that unfolds with many different phases, just as capitalism unfolds as a hydra, if I may quote the Zapatistas here, a monster with many different faces. And henceforth, for us, we have the climate justice movements within the network, within this united front, in order to learn from their tools of resistance and to learn why it's important to strive for climate justice, but also for them to learn from all the other collectives what is important to combine climate justice with. Why is climate justice important, like in solidarity with organizations in the Global South? As we know, the money starts from the West, and then the damage is done in the Global South. So also as collectives and organizations in the West, I feel we have a duty and a responsibility to learn from other struggles as well, and to see that the effects of climate justice, mainly for now, affect our comrades in the Global South, and how can we resist that here in the heart of the colonial and imperialist core?
Maybe before we move to Shrish, last question. There's an image there on screen, which is a work that you have developed collaboratively across many gatherings, and I had the luck of attending some that you organized, in which you were allying, trying to come to common agendas across the Counterpower umbrella coalition. Can you say something about this work and about the place of cultural work in all of your organizing endeavors?
Yes, first of all, this amazing work is painted by my comrade lliada, and it was really like, it's a work that took 1.5 years, and it contains like all symbols of the struggles or the organizations who have been giving trainings to us. And yeah, we believe that like every space and every move represents like either the dominant power or the true counterpower, and we think that every space should be shaped by the true owners, and they are the ones who construct those buildings and spaces, those are the ones who clean them. So we kind of claim also all the spaces that are now kind of more the space of the elite, and that's why we have our events not only in the museum, but we do it in the streets. So it's either between the walls or outside in the streets. But we believe that especially in these times, in the time of monsters, that cultural workers have the task, also the duty, to do something against what's happening now worldwide. And it's our task, our duty to bring those people together, but also to organize ourselves in the spaces that are made by the people and that are of the people, to summarize what I think.
Maybe I can also add a small part about the specific banner that you see, this artwork. It started from the first assembly of True Counterpower and was completed by the last one, that were the trainings, let's say, or the workshops. And you may call it perhaps a little tool of solidarity, in which I see this work, or the collectives also see this work, as kind of like a binding contract between us, a contract of solidarity. That if you're represented, then you stand together with all the movements that are represented on this banner. And therefore, yeah, it's something that binds us together, but also it's now at the Van Abbe Museum, but the idea is that every collective that is represented on it has every right to this work. And then it can be used for their public manifestations, in a sense, to say that all the demands put forth by us are backed by all these movements. We're not standing alone. We're standing all together as a united front.
I never actually realized that binding is in banner, and following our binding ritual and this binding banner, and that proposes an artwork as a kind of as a social contract, and also maybe as a way of imagining unity where there often is none, because you mentioned the fascist turn that brought you to organize, but we also have, I guess, accept all experiences that we're really good in combating our own comrades. Sometimes. Not today, yet.
Combating, you mean
that we also have a lot of internal fragmentation.
Ah, definitely. And now even like that's the thing. One important thing I would like to mention is that the event of the series happens in the People's Parliament of Rojava in the Van Abbe Museum. And yeah, like I am Kurdish and lliada is from Cyprus, and we have so many common enemies, and all of us have. So yeah, it's, you know, so that brings us together. And that's why like the space is also like we have the People's Parliament, we have Rojava as an inspiration, and we see that, I mean, like Middle East is maybe one of the most complicated regions, and if people like, if the movements there like kind of accomplished it, they made it like people who were divided for so many years, that they came together and built up an alternative. Yeah, we can learn from that and replicate the same here for sure. And we have no time for inside struggles, like really, the enemy is attacking us, we are all targets, so we try to emphasize this also during the True Counterpower events. We must gather and we must work together.
And also, maybe just to add on that, I think for us also creating that space in the People's Parliament, it's also an opportunity to speak about our contradictions and to learn from each other. Without speaking to each other and without exchanging, we cannot do this. And as you say, then all these contradictions emerge and they become very painful, and then it stops us from actually uniting. But we need productive spaces in which, yeah, we have the time to unfold and to learn from each other. And I also believe that this is the power of art as well, that it creates different kinds of spaces with different energy in which we can actually have that time and space.
I think we're going to move to the next questions for the next organization with Jeanne.
So, Shrish, what just came up here was also just said, which it says nothing about us without us. And this is also, I think, a slogan that your collective, Qollective, uses. Qollective is a foundation by and for racialized queer community, committed to building spaces and platforms to support, empower, and care for our peoples. You create safe and safer spaces, and even braver spaces, meetings, offer psychosocial counseling calls, the Utrecht Trans Clinic, as well as trainings, workshops, and conference, and that all under that slogan, nothing about us without us. And I wanted to ask you about actually how racial justice and LGBTQIA+ justice struggles relate to the struggle for climate justice.
Thank you so much for the question, and I'm actually really nervous to be here, so I hope I'm making sense. Especially after this full day of very, very insightful lectures that we had before this, and coming from where we are, the work that we are doing is crucially important in this time and age when we live in a society that is actively hostile, that actively does not want to include us within the society. And this work sounds impossible because it is. And if in an ideal scenario, Qollective would be able to create communities by and for our peoples, and that we are successful in doing so. But we face struggles with, I'm sure a lot of our progressive organizations here, standing here, understand. We face struggles with being funded. We face struggles with being supported. We face struggles with being seen. And that's just the reality of the society we live in. There is a government right now that's actively hostile, is actively telling us that our communities do not belong here, that we should go back to where we came from, even if we were born and raised there all our lives. And that is essentially the collective struggle, that we need to remember that all of the struggles of all of our communities, we're all sharing the same struggle. It's all one united struggle. And before I go on into the work of Qollective and how I see this as connecting to climate justice, I think it's important to first, at least for me, to connect how I understand theory to how we understand our practice. And in terms of the theory, the lectures gave a huge detailed analysis of this already, and I will try not to go on a very long tangent on this, but I have 4 main points that I want to stress. The first is that the climate crisis is inseparable from colonialism and capitalism. All of our speakers have really strongly emphasized that, and we see that in terms of how colonialism entrenched systems of inequalities that were then continued by global capitalism. The advent of the proliferation and entrenchment of, for example, of gender binary, of the status quo of what should be according to Western tradition, was proliferated through colonialism under the guise of that's what civilization ought to be, in order to justify the difference in power, in order to easily control people, because a lot of global South communities all over the world, a lot of global South cultures originally had a lot of much more fluid understandings of gender. And it was through colonialism, through the British, for example, in the enforcement of the gender binary through the penal codes implemented in India, in Malaysia, in all of their colonies, basically, through the acts of the Spanish kingdoms, of the Congolese kingdom empire, of the Dutch empire, we see how there is an inherent connection between colonialism and queer justice and gender justice. And similarly with racial justice, it's of course inseparable to separate colonialism and racial justice through the hegemonic powers that have been stratified, that have been entrenched, that currently still exist, that are still being pushed for thanks to the processes of colonialism. And that links to my second point on talking about climate justice itself. The climate movement in its origins was racist. So if you look at the origins of conservationism, of preservation, the very first wildlife reserves was an advent of colonialism. It was to take away land from indigenous and native communities in Africa, in North America, in South America, under the argument, oh, we need to preserve and conserve these lands. The advent of zoos is also a colonial imperial structure. Zoos were used to exoticize under the guise of, oh, we need to bring these animals to Europe in order to research them, in order to understand how we can preserve and conserve them. Zoos were invented during the colonial era in order to exoticize and mystify the global south communities. And of course, we cannot also ignore the fact that there were the existence of human zoos that was proliferated under colonialism, under the guise of Orientalism, these mystified peoples from Asia, from Africa, they were brought into and put into zoos all across Europe under the notion of understanding these communities, these people that are not fully human, that are completely other. So there's a huge connection between what was often proposed and promoted as Western policies to conserve and protect the environment with what was inherently racist and sexist forms of oppression and suppression of global south communities. And that strongly links to what I want to mention as my third point, which is all of these structures that happened historically, we see them continue to happen today. The contemporary structures that we have today continue to echo the remnants of the past. There is a trauma of the past that we do not want to acknowledge, as was shared in the lecture by Radha, that we seem to just act as if that we only see the bright side of the moon of the climate movement, but we don't acknowledge the dark side of its origins, of how racist it was, and how sexist it was, of how discriminatory and oppressive it was. And we see that happening today under extractivist projects with projects in the areas that the Sami and communities live in, under the guise of building solar farms or wind power farms and extracting minerals for renewable energies. We see this in the proliferation of climate racism. There's so much consequences of the climate catastrophes that we have right now that disproportionately affect racialized communities, that disproportionately affect queer communities. In many countries where there are disasters happening, it is queer communities that are actively stopped from receiving aid from governments during these processes as they're trying to recover. So there is, even today, all of the echoes of the traumas of the past continue to live on because we haven't wanted to acknowledge them. And that links to why, to collective, climate justice, racial justice, queer justice are all inherently combined, because we need to acknowledge the traumas of our past, acknowledge the fact that we're still oppressing people today. And in collective, as I said, the society we live in is extremely hostile. We don't have a space to be ourselves. We don't have a space to live and to breathe. And our goal within Collective is to go against this traditional capitalist growth-based focuses of, oh, we need to be productive, we need to be functioning members of society. Instead, in Collective, the focus here is to just find spaces for healing, spaces for dialogue, spaces, safer spaces that we can just be ourselves. And ultimately, what the climate justice movement can learn from queer theory, from decolonial theory, is that there is not one universal truth. There is not one answer, for example, to saving the environment. There is a plurality of knowledges. And one thing that's very important is to acknowledge that the very existence, myself, as, for example, as a queer, racialized person, is political. Until today, I'm demonized and threatened by this government saying that I'm a villain that's trying to ruin the morals of Dutch society, that's trying to take away everything that Dutch society has built. And our very existence in itself is resistance. And that's one of the ways in which Collective exists, is that as our community, we understand that everyone comes from different positionalities. We have members in our collective that are refugees, asylum seekers, that cannot go out to protest, that cannot lobby, because if they were to be arrested, they could be sent back. I myself am waiting for an appeal against my deportation notice, and I've been so afraid to join any of the pro-Palestine protests because I don't want to be deported. And that's the reality we live in. Our very existence is politicized. We can't exist, we cannot breathe. So in order to fight for a better climate, in order to fight for a better world, we have to find solidarity with each other. Those who can fight, those who can vocalize, that's why we build coalitions and collectives, so they can help push for the message that needs to be heard while we work behind the scenes. And that's what Collective does. We build these spaces to heal, build these spaces to find ourselves, while those who can voice us out. And that's, to me, the connection between all of these justices together. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Serda, you have brought a comrade, Abdullah. Will you join as well on the stage? Yes. Hi, welcome. Thank you for joining as well. Two of you are members of the Sudanese Refugee Collective, formed by and for Sudanese refugees in the Netherlands. We spoke a little bit before about the terminology that is being used by international media about this current situation in Sudan. We said we will not use the term civil war. You said we use war.
Yeah.
The term is war. The war between the Sudanese armed forces and the paramilitary rapid support forces that takes place in a fatal combination with increasing climate breakdown. That also has contributed to the causes of this war in the first place, and that accelerates it. Can you say something about, following up also on the previous question of Jeanne, the place of climate justice, climate struggle, climate breakdown in the context of this war and of your organizing work in the Netherlands?
Thank you. And the ongoing war in Sudan inflicted untold human suffering and devastating the country's ecosystem, as well as causing significant damage to the country's infrastructure. Sudan was already facing numerous climate-related challenges prior to the current conflict, but the past month of violence have vastly compounded the situation. The ongoing conflict has significantly affected various actors in the agriculture and food sectors. It has disturbed planting seasons and crop production, cut trade routes, and brought processing activities to a halt. Since Sudanese households rely heavily on locally grown crops, these disruptions are escalating hunger and famine in Sudan. Sudan is supposed to be the world food basket. As Sudan has numerous plant, water, and animal resources. But unfortunately, Sudan suffers from poverty and famine. The capitalists and I guess the evil of this world want us to believe that only Ukraine is important to the world and the war there must be stopped. But in Sudan, Gaza, Syria, Iraq, it's not important. Because these capitalist countries want us to be drowning in war so they can control our resources and wealth. The war in Sudan affected heavily the climate there and caused displacement. And the people of Sudan is the only loser of this war. So our organization want to bring awareness to what's going on in Sudan and how and how it affects our environment, because Sudan is important as Ukraine. Not only we want to stop the war in Ukraine, we also want to stop the war in Sudan. Do you want to say something?
No, I think you say a lot of things what also I want to say. A lot of Sudanese people want to now grow their food in Sudan, but the soldier or the RSF say to them, no, this is a war zone, you have to go out. And more than 70% of the people in Sudan, they are like a farmer. They get their food through the growing something. And we know like climate change affects a lot of the people, because our agriculture also need just water, raining to grow their farms. We don't have like in the Netherlands need a lot of Staal or other crazy things. But the water don't come. After people grow their stuff, the water come one time when the food start growing, and then 3-4 weeks, no water. everything is dry. And then they sometimes start again. And also a lot of animals will die because they don't have a lot of food to eat. Before, some people, we have a lot of nomad people, they move through Sudan, but now because of the war, they can move. They can go to, first of all, they can go to South Sudan because South Sudan say, we are another country, you have to stay just in Sudan. Then they have like, in a very dry season, they can go to Chad. All of the countries also like block their border from Sudan. We can go in or out. Like in Egypt, before we have like agreement that people, women or old people go to Egypt without visa. And now you have to pay up to €1,000 to get just a visa in the black market to enter the country. I think that the Sudanese people felt like we are a forgotten war. And I think before maybe some of you know about Khartoum process. If you don't know, the Khartoum process is like an agreement between the EU and few countries, including also Sudan, to control the border of Sudan, because they say a lot of refugees go first to Sudan, and then they go to Libya, and then they come to Europe. Because this, they pay, I think, more than 300 million euro to those countries, including Sudan, and who was also like in the border was the RSF. Like the EU make the agreement with Sudan, but they say because RSF control the western part of Sudan, the RSF get a lot of money. And with this money now they're killing the Sudanese people. I think that EU have to stop making all this crazy agreement with dictator country who use the people and who kill the people. Because even Geert Wilders, if you really don't want refugee, don't make war in our countries. We will never come.
And that brings us back a lot, I think, to the talk that Rada de Souza gave this morning when she showed these intersections between war economy, extractive corporate economies, and how these interests coalesce in creating conditions that forces people to become refugees. Just a last question, maybe for now, is there's often a distinguishment, there's often different terms used for different conditions of people fleeing. So some are called climate refugees, others not. How does that fit in? Because what you're explaining here is that they don't seem to be separable at all. How do you see this?
I think it's not. I think it's all the same. I think if someone from Somalia can get food because everything dry, every animals are dying, and he is never buying something from AliExpress, and then he come here and you say to me, go to your country. No, I think it's not separate. If someone flee from the war, or because he don't have money, or he don't have something to eat because the climate change, I think it's the same. Because if I am really, to be honest, today is like a lot of raining and a lot of cold, and if it's really nice for me, I really want to stay in Sudan, if it's good. It is really like, I heard the next week, the whole week will be like raining and 3 degrees. But I have to search here, just because it's not safety in my country, and I think we don't have to separate them. We say like this is people who flow like the capitalism, who want to control our country. And one thing, like they say to a lot of African countries, is like a poor people, Venezuela, poor people, poor countries. When when few countries now say to France, please go out our country, they don't want to go. Mm-hmm. If you are poor, please go and let us. We don't want to give you our uranium. We don't want to give you our gold. We don't want to give you our cotton. We don't want to give you our oil. If you think we are really poor and you want to come and help us with a little bit money for UNRWA or I don't know which organization who help people, they come and take the gold and they give you some money, and also a lot of the people who work there, who give the money to the people, are also from here. They come, they sit in a very luxe hotel. They do a lot of crazy things there. They have big cars, and they give us a little bit things. Now more than like from the war start until now, there are no one gold mining stopped mining until now. But all of the places for food, all of the places is like stop. Why we do that? We are not poor, and we want to really stay in our countries. If it's like a nice. I want to add why I bring this with me. This one is what is the name?
Mufraka.
Mufraka. Yes, and what we do with this?
We cook with it.
We cook with this. Like few years ago, when the woman went out to go to the demonstration, to lead the demonstration in Sudan, maybe a lot of you will see it. One of the politicians said to them, the woman is a place of the woman is just to take the mufraka,
the kitchen,
and make food. And like 3,000 women take this mufraka the next day, and they went out with the mufraka, and they say, we take the mufraka, and we want to go out to show you that our place is not just a kitchen. And because this, I take it to every demonstration I have. And Saturday we have demonstration in Amsterdam in Museumplein. If you can join, it will be really nice. And thank you for today.
So this Saturday at?
This Saturday at 3 o'clock.
3 o'clock.
In Museumplein, and we will walk in really cold and raining.
Thank you, Abdullah. Thank you.
That made the climate question also very, very concrete. I hand over to Jeanne, Woonopstand.
Yeah.
Housing rebellion.
Is it? Yeah, it's working. Hi, Mustafa. We work together, so it feels like... we are
on a first-name basis.
Yeah, we're on first-name basis. So, Mustafa, you're working for the Woonopstand. I see here it's called the Housing Rebellion, where you are actually, you could say, the spear person of a broad movement that fights the growing number of unhoused people, the dissemination of social housing, discrimination of black and people of color renting or buying, and the exploitation of renters by property owners. And you can say that very many social issues sort of like come together in housing struggles, but then quite often a lot of people don't recognize that there's an intersection in these housing struggles. And I know you, of course, from the Tweebelsbuurt, which is part of the Afrikanenwijk, where you...
In Rotterdam.
Where you very much also expressed that it took a lot of learning together to understand this, or to make people understand this intersection between the different struggles when it comes to a very urgent question that relates to us all, and that's a proper house to live in. And if you want to do it in Dutch, we do it with translation. Yeah.
Is this mic working? Yes. Yeah. Yeah, in the housing struggle, a lot of things come together. We say that the climate struggle is the housing struggle because of numerous examples. One of them is like the number of households that have single glass. The number of households exceeds more than 1 million households that have single glass. So especially for people with lower income, it's a big problem because they're already struggling to put warm food on the table, but now they have to choose between a warm house and warm food. And it's becoming more and more difficult even when the gas prices go up. So we are fighting also for, our fight is also the climate justice fight. So also when we talk about subsidies going to sustainability, a large part of the subsidies go to the higher income class. Almost 80% of the subsidies for sustainability go to the 20% richest people in the Netherlands. So, and there are also other examples like the slum landlords get subsidy for their sustainability for their houses, but they don't want to do that because, they say it costs us a lot of money. So, especially again, people in lower income class, face the consequences of that because they have high energy bills, and that's becoming more and more difficult nowadays.
Yeah, and as I remember, when you do the amazing guiding tours through the Tweebelsbuurt, that you also said it is also an issue of when houses get demolished and people get relocated, that there is also destruction happening on many different levels, on resources, on people's lives, on stories, on histories that are destructed, on relationships that are broken apart, and that actually that is also a violation of rights in all fronts.
Yeah, especially when we talk about demolition of houses. There are numerous problems with that because mostly the houses that are being demolitioned are people with a migrant background. We saw that happening in our neighborhood, the Tweebelsbuurt. There was a letter also sent by the United Nations to the Dutch government about our neighborhood. And the conclusion was that disproportionately more people with migrant background were affected by the demolition. So when we talk about demolition, it's also like a racial injustice happening. And one other thing with demolition of houses is the climate struggle, because we all know that buildings are taking up a lot of CO2. So when the municipality is talking about climate justice, they have to start with stopping the demolition of houses, because it's very weird, to say the least, when you talk about climate struggle and justice, that you still are slopen van sociale huurwoningen. Yeah. It's not only class, it's also racial, because when we started fighting, we also told them it's like the housing policy is racist, and we were told, no, that's not racist. But at the beginning of this year, there was an article published in Vestbeton. I could recommend it to all of you to read it. And one sociologist from the Erasmus University conducted a research into the housing policy of the municipality for the past 16 years, from 2006 to 2022. And her main conclusion was the housing policy is racist. There was only one question asked to the municipality, and onze wethouder Chantal Zegers answered, I'm not discriminating. So that was it. But yeah, it's maddening.
Yeah, and it's also, I think, an anti-capitalist struggle, because I remember this banner and also the very violent police action that took place on the bridge, because Rotterdam is happening, makes it happen.
This is the slogan, yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's also an anti-capitalist struggle.
Yeah, because this was the second demonstration held in the Netherlands, one of the biggest. The biggest one was the previous one in Amsterdam. It was in September 2021. Almost 20,000 people attended that demonstration. And the second one was here in Rotterdam. But yeah, on the Erasmus Bridge, the police brutal beaten down our demonstrations. So yeah, it was terrible. Yeah.
And there was a lot of people exposed to police violence who are not necessarily familiar with it as well, because the coalition behind Woonopstand is huge. Like you have people from every imaginable, people who are not necessarily take the streets usually, or.
Yeah, there were a lot of attendees that went for the first time to demonstration. So when you experience this kind of police brutality, it was very difficult. But because people now are also afraid to go to the demonstrations. Yeah, if you see that you are beaten down and your fellow attendees are beaten down by the police, yeah, it's hard to come to the next demonstration.
The lesson is that they were never there for you in the first place. It's just that this was the first day that you find out. I think it's a primal education for a lot of us. Like the first moment you realize, yes, okay, this system was never for me. Moving to our last comrade here, Victor from XR Justice Now. First of all, thank you for this, Victor.
You're welcome.
We are overrepresented Rotterdammers here on this.
I feel right at home. Yeah,
on
I
this
got the
stage. Yes. We none of us, of course, like the Euromast, but now that night we really like the Euromast. So thank you a lot for that. I think all of the organizations, representatives that are here in this assembly, we ask specifically the question of what is the place of ecological struggle in a way to show that it does not stand separate from other subjects. You are a representative of XR. I think Extinction Rebellion needs little introduction. But you are part of a wing of XR that actually explicitly wants to address social causes and social struggles through an environmental lens, but without separating the two either. It almost feels sometimes like a critique or correction on maybe earlier development of the movement. Can you say something about how XR Justice Now emerged, your work, how we join, how we can make the Euromast look like this?
Yes. Well,
yeah, I didn't want to finish it with great again, but yes.
Actually, we lost the beamer, so we cannot do this anymore, sadly. But I think you're actually...
This is a call people for a beamer.
I think you're actually quite spot on that it's a critique of the developments that happened within Extinction Rebellion. And this was actually the second action that we did. The first one we did on the Domtoren, right here in Utrecht. Also a projection, but the pictures of that were a lot less nice, so that's why this one is used most. But when I joined Extinction Rebellion, it was actually 2 months before the Woonopstand, and the Woonopstand was also my first time being exposed to such police brutality. And when I joined Extinction Rebellion, it was an anti-capitalist, intersectional, anti-colonial movement that explicitly collaborated with other movements, and that also was that was really combating our threatening extinction, right? That's why we're called Extinction Rebellion. And I think the Woonopstand is a very good example of that, because the reason the police was so violent, they said, when questions were being asked at the municipal council, they said, Abu Talib said, that they heard that Extinction Rebellion was planning to do something. And that's why they had to separate some of the demonstrators from the others. And that was actually sort of true, because we were collaborating with anarchists, with squatters, to do something with a little tiny wooden house. And so that's the way I knew Extinction Rebellion, and that also, because you said, not only Ukraine is important. A year later, or a couple of months later, I don't remember the exact timeline, Extinction Rebellion was planning to do an action against the arms fair that was supposed to take place in Rotterdam 2 years ago. Then that didn't go through, because on the day we were planning to do the action, Putin invaded Ukraine. So we decided to not do that action because it would be not very good. But then still, when Putin invaded Ukraine, Extinction Rebellion did a lot of actions in solidarity with Ukraine, as they should have done. And then fast forward 1 or 2 years ago, 1 or 2 years, we had the whole A12 shebang happening, and suddenly XR is not anymore the movement that I knew, but it's suddenly a movement full of white people that want to protect their future children from fossil subsidies. And then the genocide started, and Extinction Rebellion was silent. And that really made me very angry. And so we decided to reclaim Extinction Rebellion by starting these actions. And the movement almost exploded. The two camps came into being. But I think now, more than a year later, I can say we've won. And Extinction Rebellion, even Lucas Winnips, who you all might know, who is like the head of the A12 actions, he now also is wearing a keffiyeh, right? So we've won. And I think the main thing that we're trying to do is not only we want to do our own campaigns, right? So we're really trying to combat arms trade and that kind of stuff, but we also really want to give a platform to other struggles, because Extinction Rebellion, we have to come to terms with the fact that we are the biggest movement in the Netherlands. Which, like, I'm not saying that to pat ourselves on the back, but we're huge. We have a shitload of money. We have enormous reach. When Extinction Rebellion does something, it gets a lot of attention. And so it is our duty as a movement that is trying to combat extinction to give our platform to the people that are actually being, and also non-human animals that are actually being threatened with extinction. And so that's what we're trying to do.
And not just giving your platform, because also in the actions, the Black Piet is racism, Zwarte Piet is racism campaigns, you are there, bodies on the spot. Yep. It's not just about, hey, you can borrow, you can have some of our money. It's about actually taking part on all of these different campaigns and highlighting,
mobilizing for other people's struggles, taking part in the actions, also. Indeed helping plan actual actions, and that's also really what we're trying to do with Extra Justice now, is that we're trying to be a bit more diffuse in terms of like, oh, I'm a part of Extinction Rebellion, yes or no. It's more like, oh, we can be the bridge between you guys and Extinction Rebellion. And for instance, with the student Intifada in Amsterdam, right, that was really big. A lot of people that were actively organizing that were also a part and started becoming active through Extinction Rebellion Justice Now, and decided to share our knowledge. So, for instance, legal trainings, but also legal support, that kind of stuff. We were actually able to hand that over to to that specific struggle.
That's powerful too. And also, when I was listening to as XR Justice Now started as a critique of XR, I had to think a lot of listening to Schish just a moment ago about the racialized component in the climate movement, in the history of the climate movement. Listening to you also brought back some reading on. There's quite a known book that's called How Green Were the Nazis, who really showcased, had a huge so-called environmental protection schemes while running the biggest exterminative war machine in history. And it made me think also of the SDF service for vegan army boots, before you go and exterminate a people and their natures. And in general, listening to you, I feel that you are all exceptionally precise in how not just your struggles intersect, but how the climate justice movement is inextricable from these social struggles. Jeanne, questions?
I think it's time to ask the rest of the room.
Selective questions. Yes.
Selective questions.
Selective questions before collective dinner.
Yes. Are there people who have a question? I think we decided I do downstairs.
You take low questions, I take high questions.
Yes.
Yes, high question here.
Thank you, and thanks to all the great inputs that we've heard throughout the day, but also especially in this session. I have a question regarding how you work against the potential co-option and instrumentalization of movements. I think, particularly in this political climate where the Netherlands loves to posture as being the great champion, even as it is a genocide enabler and supporter. So just to hear a bit more about how you work around that, I think particularly around pinkwashing, for example, but not just. I think across board, the Netherlands is the champion and we're all supposed to worship that.
Who wants to go first?
Collective, we do rely a lot on working together with the municipality of Utrecht. And the Utrecht municipality announced a long-scale project of how they want to be the first city in the Netherlands that's a human rights city, and how they're going to take efforts promoting what Qollective has done, for example. The trans clinic that we do, the Utrecht Trans Clinic, is being funded by the Utrecht municipality together with GGZ Utrecht, Utrecht region. And they're using these examples to say, look at Utrecht being this human rights city. And I think we walk a very precarious line between, are we being co-opted, but at the same time, without this, there's no trans clinic, and racialized communities, sex workers, undocumented migrants don't have access to accessible trans care. And especially as a smaller organization, from my perspective, I can share that our organization very much struggles with trying to walk this line. How do we find the right balance? How do we still make sure that we're still being heard? What's recently we found a way to do that, at least in a very minor way, is we started engaging with the Utrecht Human Rights Coalition. I mentioned this to Jeanne the other day. We had a meeting as well, to link up with larger organizations that do have the power to call out the Utrecht municipality, that do have the means to do so, to do it for us, because we can't afford to make our communities lose this access to trans care. And then I think this links to the point that was mentioned by Radha about like legal personhood, and also the point raised on Extinction Rebellion and making use of the platform and rights they have. There is, we pretend that human rights are universal. Utrecht wants to be this human rights city because human rights apply universally to all, but there is a hierarchy to human rights. Even amongst the organizations that are all standing here, there's a hierarchy of the rights we have access to, and we all may have the same legal personhood in order to exercise these rights. But for example, Qollective may not vocalize on certain issues, may not be vocally critic on the Utrecht municipality, but our partners within the True Counterpower coalition can. And that's how we see the need, as lliada and Serda mentioned, to form these progressive coalitions, because the reality we live in is there is a hierarchy of rights. The reality that we have to then work in is that we thus have to unite our forces and make sure the ones with the platforms like Extinction Rebellion and True Counterpower Coalition are able to voice out, and we continue to care for our communities.
Maybe if I can add one small thing, yeah? Because I think co-optation also often happens when within the social spectrum, right? You have movements such as Milieudefensie or Oxfam that are a bit more like established, and you have the more radical flank. And I think co-optation often happens when the center and the radical flank, they stop communicating with each other and they stop talking to each other. And so I think it's also very important to continue to recognize each other's places within the movement and respect each other's roles within the movement, and allow the radical flank to be that radical flank and keep the center grounded in an intersectional perspective, but also let the middle actually claim those wins that they are able to claim because they are a bit more like accepted. Yeah.
Thank you. I have here June.
Just to reaffirm True Counterpower's contribution to communities in struggle, in one of the sessions we worked, the Filipino community in struggle was connected to a group in where? Yes, it was about the. No, this was another case. We were referred to another group who were opposing a road building project, and the company Boskalis was using Butamix in the road building project. And Butamix, Boskalis is also involved in a project in the Philippines, reclamation of Manila Bay in order to build the Manila International Airport. And through Counterpower, we started building that relationship. Now we have a campaign linking two groups. So it's a struggle in the Philippines and the struggle in the Netherlands. So from the Philippines to the Netherlands, Boskalis must go. Thank you very much.
Question down.
Yes, in Europe and in the United States, the so-called migrant crisis has been raised to fever pitch. No, they blame migrants for practically all the problems that Europe, that US face. Well, according to United Nations Agency on Migration, there are around 281 million international migrants today. Wow. And the three main causes are wars and conflicts, poverty, and climate crisis. And who are the main perpetrators of these three causes? Isn't it the highly developed countries of the West? They conquered countries, and until now they are the causes of the major wars that are happening all over the world, causing migrants. What about poverty? Through colonization, diba? They colonized the countries of the global south and kept them poor while they became rich. What about climate change? The hundreds of years of their industrialization is what caused all these problems of climate change. But they blame the victims for the problems that are happening. And especially the problem in Sudan, the three causes are concentrated there. No? You have the conflicts, you have poverty, and the climate crisis. Wow. So the struggle of the people in Sudan are really as important as many of the struggles in the global south.
Can I say something about blaming the immigrants?
Yes,
it's
absolutely.
This scapegoating politics is a strategy what has been working for a lot of years. And let's blame the immigrants. It's easy to point the finger at the immigrants, then telling about the housing crisis. It's not a natural phenomenon that fell out the sky. It's a consequence of deliberate policy making. But they blame the asylum seekers. But if you talk about that, no, it's easier to point the finger at the immigrants. So, yeah, I can relate to what you're saying.
Final interventions?
I just want to add to that victim blaming, which is, again, relating it to what we discussed in the morning. It's, again, a very template characteristic of the kind of liberal capitalist modernity that we have. If you take gender violence, it's always the woman's fault. It's never the man's fault. She can be raped, she can be killed, but she is the one at fault. If you take poverty, it's the poor people's fault that they are poor. I mean, who wants to be poor? Yeah? If you take homelessness, it's the homeless people who have not tried to work hard and buy a house. So this again is something much bigger, and it is embedded in the whole systemic mentality that we talked about earlier. I just thought I'll throw that in.
Yes, I think analysis is coalescing. Maybe just to repeat, there were questions earlier. How do we sync ideology and praxis? The new terms that we are exploring here in praxis. Well, here are Woonopstand, XR Justice Now, Sudanese Refugees Collective, Collective, who have websites, organizations, campaigns, protests, amongst others, this Saturday, 3 o'clock, Museumplein, that can be joined. I want to just close with a final question to you, and but it's more from experience, that whenever I participate in your assemblies, it's a kind of reaffirmation that, politics means something. Like it's a reaffirmation, even in a sense of like that it's possible to be represented. I see and I listen to you. It's like this is the coalition that we have been waiting for, right? But at the same time, the distance between this coalition and the claim to power by the neo-fascists, the claim to power of the state apparatus, and all the violence that they are going to be able to impose upon us, and the responsibility that brings also to us to make sure that not one single person is deported in this country. Like, how do we wrestle this power from the state apparatus? Can we do without?
I think this is off.
No, it's on.
No, it's on. No, the light is not.
Then I give you my mic.
Yeah. So, I think this is like this question we can talk hours, and I think it's also the main question we should really all discuss and think about, because this is like, starting the preps to what is awaiting us. And I mean, like, the thing is, there is a dominant power, and we try to fight this power as anti-system organizations. The question is, do we want to take the power? That's the first very questions. Do we want our social rights or just some crumbs? Or do we really, really want to kind of claim our future and organize ourselves? That's the question. And for that, true counterpower is just a part of the preparation of more radical changes or towards more radical changes. So in that sense, what we have to do is organize. And like really this thing that we see it, I think the Middle East is kind of a mirror of what's happening, or what their policies are. Like, first of all, how they divide people, how they suppress people through regimes, and really take everything or co-opt everything that belongs to the people. And but here it's more subtle. Like, it's more subtle. We don't feel it maybe directly because it's not here yet. But we know that you just have to listen to the debates in the parliament, and you know what's waiting us. So we will face similar things. So in that sense, it's very important to organize, but also to collaborate much more. In addition, because Victor said something like, everyone has its role, and we should let them do it. I agree partly, but there's one thing I would like to say is that we are in times that all the institutions of the system is exposed. Like, none of their rules, international laws are like, no one is listening to them. They don't even. So we see that those institutions, like, they were built up for the bourgeois, for the oppressors, but now it's like so clear, like crystal clear. And that's why we should really be aware of the fact that radicalizing is necessary. Moreover, it's our self-defense. And that's why we really should focus on our own work instead of continuously reacting, but we have to act and build up our own structures, our own infrastructure. It will be tough, it will not be easy, but we have the tools, we have the power. We just need to work a bit more hard, I think.
Inshallah.